But I was asked to talk about the state of the Republican conference. And so let's go back and look at what's happened. We started out in January of last year. We went through 15 rounds of speaker, trying to pass things like rules that many of you know was always just sort of a procedural or pro forma vote, and you know, not really anything that was anything other than just a straight up partisan vote. And we watched last year as rules were going down because folks in the majority weren't voting for them and using it as leverage because we had this razor thin majority. We watched as the first time in American history where we vacated the chair or threw out the Speaker of the House. And it's not because we were innovative and it was a great idea. It was an absolutely awful idea. Here we are with a Republican majority on paper, yet we are 4 months into the FY24 fiscal year, and we are still operating under riders and budget level numbers that were negotiated by Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, and Biden. But we're in the majority. After we threw out the Speaker of the House, we chewed up approximately a dozen members of the Republican conference. Yes, there was Scalise, Emmer, and Jim Jordan, but don't forget about Kevin Hern, Byron Donald, Stan Muser, Gary Palmer, Austin Scott, and many, many others. And I want to be clear, that wasn't just a nothing burger. There's scar tissue with a lot of those people that ran for Speaker and didn't get there. There were little battles that occurred between some of these candidates. And I'm going to say it again, there's scar tissue that's there. It harmed the conference, that entire exercise. But don't worry, because the geniuses that threw the Speaker out, they knew that as soon as we brought a new Speaker in, we were going to have all these new options to actually pass the appropriations bill and make huge change, right? Right? No, we've done CR after CR, and we've actually lost leverage compared to where we were back in September, October of last year. This whole thing has been a disaster, and it was not something that was necessary. And I want y'all to think about this for just a minute. Just seriously think about this. We have three branches of government, right? If we want to get rid of the president or Secretary Mayorkas, we have to have a majority vote in the House, and then what? A super majority vote in the Senate, right? To impeach the president or secretary or whoever else. If we want to get rid of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, what do? We have to have a majority vote in the House, and we have to have a super majority vote in the Senate. But if we want to get rid of the head of the legislative branch, you just have one moron who files a motion to vacate, and you can throw him out. So I do want to make note that we need to fix and change this. Having this type of tentative status is not appropriate for the head of one of the branches of government. Does somebody need to be, sort of there and impenetrable? No. But that standard, that threshold is way too low, and we can't do that to ourselves. Now, how many of you remember weeks ago when Congressman Chip Roy, who's a friend of mine and a very bright guy, went down to the floor and said, "What have Republicans done? What have they done?" I challenge you to come down here and tell me, which if I had my TV on, I normally watch special orders religiously. That's right. I would have sprinted down there and explained to him what Republicans have done. Because one of the biggest accomplishments that we had last year was actually the debt ceiling negotiation, where we went in and we negotiated and calibrated our ask with the leverage that we had. We didn't go in and we didn't ask for the sun, moon, and stars. We calibrated our ask with our leverage that resulted in what? I think a pretty damn good conservative win, cutting spending by $2.1 trillion, the largest spending reduction, in American history. We rescinded more dollars, tens of billions of dollars, the highest amount ever rescinded in American history. We strengthened work requirements, the strongest improvements in over 20 years, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is that we came in and made fundamental changes to NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, or regulatory streamlining, for the first time in 43 years. That law was sacrosanct, you cannot touch it, and boy did we touch it. We carved that thing up and made huge improvements when I say that. But we did it because we calibrated our leverage with our ask. And what we found ourselves in the Republican conference doing is going down this path where we go mislead the American public and make them believe that we can achieve this. And anything short of balancing the budget tomorrow, of absolutely closing down the border and having the wall up next week, anything short of going back to energy policies of the Bush administration is a failure. And what is so remarkable is this evolution that we've seen in Congress, where people, these folks that years ago would have been outliers, that never would have gotten the time of day, never would have been on TV, would have been struggling to raise campaign cash, are suddenly the people that the people that the public knows better than anyone else. You think I'm wrong? Look, AOC is really nice, but she was a bartender and came to Congress. And now she's one of the most well-known politicians up here. Said another way, she's unencumbered by experience. You get that? She can do and say things that other people realize that's crazy or irrational. But look, we have them too. We do. We have them on our side as well. And these are the people that are out there with millions of social media followers, that are out there setting false narratives and then acting on them. Said another way, completely just lying and misleading the American people, and then acting on it. And I believe that that's largely what happened with vacating the speakership. Completely lying. And so we're in this really dangerous situation now where social media, as powerful and amazing as it is, I don't think that we've really caught up with it in regard to how to properly use it. I mean, look, think about what I said just a minute ago. Setting a false narrative and acting on it, or lying to the American people. That's what Russia was doing in the 2016 elections. Read the Senate Intelligence Committee report on what they did. That's what they were doing. The Intelligence Committee calls this psychological operations. We do it in the military as well. But right now, some people here are calling it governing. And it's incredibly dangerous what's happening. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not at all dissing on or shooting down the objectives of the Freedom Caucus and others. Let me be very clear. I fully support balancing the budget. I fully support more rational energy policy. I believe we should build a border wall in places where it makes sense, and border security experts say we should do it. We've got to stop this reckless border policy that we see today. But I also understand that there's something called the White House and the Senate that are obstructions to, or obstacles to, what it is we want to achieve. And so we can go out there and keep telling everybody we're going to do this, or we can realize that it's not going to be a single play to get there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this leverage, and we're going to get to here, and we're going to go to that next one and get to here, and next one and get to here. And of course, all part of this is making sure we're communicating, we're educating the American public to get them on our side. Border right now is like a 70 or 80% issue. And quite frankly, we should have had border wins last year. But because we're so stupid and tripping all over ourselves, because we really don't have a majority, we sort of have this coalition government that loosely exists today. Because of that, we've been unable to get the wins that should have been easy pickings. So we've done this to ourselves, and it's incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And I want to talk a little bit about why it is. And I know a couple of you in here have heard me talk about this, but I want to say it again to those of you that haven't had a chance to talk to about this. Look, our framers, I mean, the wisdom of the structure of government is just oozes with wisdom. I mean, it really is amazing, right? These three branches of government, this executive branch, this legislative branch, and the judicial. This whole balance of powers, the checks and balances. But there's one flaw in what they did. No one really thought about what happens when one of them becomes entirely dysfunctional. And that would be us, the Congress, in this instance. And so how many of you have heard people saying these damn activist judges and legislating from the bench? And how many of you have heard people say, oh, this executive overreach and these executive orders that go well beyond their authority? I know I hear it all the time. But when you have a void in one of the branches of government, the other ones are trying to step in and fill the void because we've become so dysfunctional. We've done this to ourselves. Now, why does that matter? Because if you're a citizen and you've got a problem or concern with what's happening with government, are you picking up the phone and calling Joe Biden? Are you picking up the phone and calling Chief Justice Roberts? No, you're calling your member of Congress, the person that represents you. And if that function of government, if that branch of government is completely stagnant or dysfunctional, then the people are the ones that suffer. The whole genius behind our structure of government and representation, it no longer exists. And so we're headed in this direction of what we left, where we've got these dictatorships or monarchies. And I know that sounds dramatic, but we have insane border policy today, and we have done exactly nothing to stop it. We've got energy policy that lacks any inkling of common sense or rationale. We've got emissions going up, prices going up, and more dependence upon foreign sources. Like, which of those is good for America? None of them are. And so this whole balance of powers or checks and balances, the whole representation of what's in the best interest of the American public is being doused right now by this dysfunction in government, by this civil war that is happening within our own party and to some degree within the Congress, where politics reigns instead of what's best for the country. And look, I know we're a Republican club, I'm a Republican, not going to apologize about that, but I do like what George Washington said in his farewell address, where he talked about it in his farewell address. And y'all know farewell addresses for politicians, that's where the courage comes out, right? He said, political parties may occasionally advance popular ends, but over time and change, ambitious, cunning, and unprincipled men and women are going to usurp the power of the people and assume the reins of government for themselves. Let me just summarize that. You're going to see political parties do things for themselves, as opposed to doing things for the people. And I think we're seeing that now in some of the dumb decisions that are being made by parties or by factions of parties. I think that as we move forward, we've got to take on some characteristics of being in the minority, and I'll explain what I mean there. Being in the minority is easy because you unite against what the other party does, right? And it's really easy. And when we were in the minority, we were all together. We were. And now we're finding ourselves fighting with one another more so than we are fighting for things. And I think that we've got to take on a characteristic of the majority of the minority and unite against bad ideas, unite for things that actually make sense and are in America's interest. And again, I could go on and on. Just think about this budget situation. I know we sit here and talk about these problems with budget and they seem like they're so far off. Look, we're going to spend $10 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars, over the next 10 years on debt service alone. Just on debt service. How many of you, the organizations you represent, the people you represent, could do something with $10 trillion other than just paying debt service? Think about the problems we could solve with that. It's extraordinary. With energy, I'll say it again. We've watched as our energy policies in the United States have directly resulted in Iran profiting $60 billion above their regular baseline. $60 billion. Venezuela, $65 billion. And what is Iran doing with that money? I mean, that's why right now, bless you, that's why right now there's a $17 billion supplemental on the table. Is because Iran's out there funding Houthis, funding Hezbollah, funding Hamas, funding Islamic Jihad, Jenin Brigade, and all these others that are out there attacking us and killing American service members. This is outrageous. It's harming Americans in so many ways. But because we can't unite, because we can't exercise leverage, we can't calibrate our leverage with our ask, we're stuck with it and we're not getting wins there. And we should have gotten them, I'm going to say it again, last year. Look, I know that y'all have questions and I've probably gone over time, but I want to say one last thing that probably resonates with you. Look, we're in this situation now, and I think it's become much more radical over the past several years, where you have a Republican administration and a Democrat administration. And think about the changes when we went from President Obama to President Trump, right? That pendulum swung. And we go from President Trump to President Biden. And that pendulum swinging. And you represent organizations, you represent people, you're trying to develop a strategic plan, you're trying to figure out how and where to invest in a way that makes sense for the long term. How do you do that? Like, how do you know what to do whenever you've got all of these crazy pendulum swings? And look, this may be a 4-year president like the last one. And so you're sitting here trying to make a 30-year decision whenever on investments when you can't figure out what's going to happen in the next year. One of the things about the United States that makes it a magnet for investment is the stability. You all know. You can go out there and you can go gamble. You can go out there and go gamble in this third world country, and you can say, man, if we hit it, it's going to be awesome. We're going to get 80% returns. But you know the likelihood of that is very, very low. Or you can invest in the United States, where you've got stability, where you have certainty, and you know you're going to get that 8% return. And it's not 80, but you know what? It's solid, it's guaranteed, it's certain. And look what we're doing now. We're even disrupting that through all of these crazy pendulum swings, through all of the crazy dysfunction that we're seeing in our own government. So in closing, I'll say this. We've got to develop the characteristics of when we were in the minority. Unite around good ideas, unite against bad things, and recognize that you're not going to get a grand slam every hit. You're not going to get a touchdown every play, but you've got to have a strategy, and you have to articulate it to the conference on how that 3-yard run, how that double is going to advance you to your ultimate goal. And make sure we're being honest with the American public as we do it.
Okay. Well,